everyone, and welcome to the China EVs and More podcast, where my co-host, Lei Xing, and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners and viewers, welcome back. We ask that you help us get the word out about this podcast and subscribe and like so you don't miss anything from us in the future. My name is Tu Li. I am the managing director at Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull some of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which, of course, I encourage you all to do. Lei, a still moving in Lei with a bunch of boxes around him. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
You are exactly right. My boxes are hiding in my closet. So this is your co-host, Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. This is episode number 240. I had a feeling that autonomy was going to be a major topic that we're going to talk about because the past few days, there's been a lot of autonomy news. Just this morning, WeRide announced they're starting passenger rides in Dubai with Uber. So that's going online. And then, of course, yesterday was the big Rivian Autonomy AI Day. I watched a little bit of that, and we can talk about that. Earlier, Mercedes and Momenta is going to launch their sort of the robotaxi in Abu Dhabi with a local partner called Waymo. So a bunch of autonomy news. We have some updated NEV sales numbers. So those are what's on my mind. Where do you want to go first?
I want to hear your thoughts on Rivian's AI Day.
I tweeted that it was déjà vu. Because,
all over again.
No, meaning that we've watched tons and tons of EV launches and whatever XX days from the startups, from the legacies. And what I meant by déjà vu is I feel like Rivian is almost as close to a Chinese smart EV startup because of the jargons that they talked end-to-end, LLM, LiDAR, Personal L4. Personal L4 is interesting because now I think we have XPeng's the first, I believe, talked about a personal L4 versus a shared robotaxi. And then GM seems to be going to that route as well. By the way, GM stock price going up more than 50% year to date was not in my bingo card somehow, right? And then now you have Rivian talk about all of these jargons, and most important of all, perhaps, the Wrap One, their own kind of in-house developed SoC, following the footsteps of Wei Xiaoli. So that's my initial reaction. I mean, it's they're talking about everything that the Chinese smart EV startups are talking about. So it seems that they kind of, it was leap and bounds. All of a sudden, they're closer now. But besides Rivian and Tesla, we really can't find anybody else in the Western world, at least in North America, that we could have multiple number of these startups talking about these things. It's really, it's a handful. So that's my,
You want to know my thoughts?
Yeah, please. That's why we're here.
I am with you. It is déjà vu all over again, as Yogi Berra said. You point to what the Chinese companies are talking about, but a lot of what the Rivian had talked about with their 3 or 4 speakers yesterday are already being implemented in China. That's what I mean by déjà vu. So everything that they've announced is not revolutionary. It's not moving the needle. It's just putting them into the top tier. And I think that's what you're saying, right? They went from, I don't know what their strategy is, to, okay, if they implement all these things, then they become in the top tier of EV makers. I'm going to expand this out because I think also what you were referring to is maybe some of the humanoid stuff, some of the silicon design stuff, and the legacy automakers aren't really talking about that. The Chinese EV companies, Tesla's talking about it. A handful of other companies are also talking about it. But there's the legacy automakers have unions. They have tens and hundreds of thousands of employees. So as they're closing factories, as they're writing off investments a la GM, SAIC, Ford, and some of their EV investment write-offs, Stellantis as well, I think it's hard for them to go and have an AI day and say, we are investing in all these things and then closing factories. So I think it would send a weird message. And I do agree with you. I don't know. So 3 or 4 people pinged me in the last couple of days asking about why do I think GM share price is over $80. So that's the interesting thing. I didn't hear anything during yesterday's event that was like, And I'll go a step further. I'm tweeting, or I'm not tweeting. I'm talking to somebody about this while it's happening. And I looked at some of the voice commands where they're making recommendations for restaurants, talking about changing range. That's an integration. I don't think they're creating that. They're integrating existing apps and existing features into their ecosystem. That's different than actually creating it from scratch. So,
yeah, about
still significant, but not as significant as building this from the ground up without using Google Maps, without using all these other tools that help them create the seamless, or what they hope to be a seamless experience.
So I was actually even talking about GM with my wife. Why? I think one of the reasons, maybe a couple, is first of all, we saw the Tesla numbers, 4-year low in November in the US.
November,
39,000 versus like 50,000 a year ago. That's one. Two, the policy changes from Trump, EPA. I think that's a major booster. But back to Rivian, you mentioned about that voice assistant, right? This digital AI assistant. I did notice something interesting, which makes them still behind the Chinese, is every time you speak to it, you have to press a little button to wake it up. They don't have continuous language yet, which is probably already standard on many of the Chinese. And the latency is still, I think, for us being spoiled, the latency is still way too long.
That was
right? But
something that was noticeable.
It was impressive.
Yes.
I think it was impressive. I think I heard a lot of wows, and I was like, yeah.
Exactly.
But it's impressive. But I think integrating the simple thing, I think, as a Google Calendar in the car to your phone, and the phone gets updated. I think that's where, for the legacies, it's hard to achieve. And they did it. But they're still somewhat behind the Chinese. If we're talking about speed, right? Reactions and continuous
this thing isn't going to
language.
launch for another quarter and a half. So that's the other thing that's, to your point about speed.
Yeah. And the other thing that I'm not sure about you, but I did not like, but I understood why they had to do it, is the $2,500 subscription fee for the Autonomy platform, which again, we go back to China, is nowadays they try to make everything standard. One number about LiDAR, a quarter of the new NEVs sold in China now has LiDAR. That's the latest number.
It's going to be standard within 18 months. It's going to be standard, except on Teslas.
I think a quarter of the models launched, not sales, I think already has LiDAR standard in China.
And I was told it's RoboSense that's supplying that LiDAR. So,
well, Luminar stock actually went up a little bit because of, we don't know exactly who yet, but not surprised if we know RoboSense supplies Lucid. That's public info. So, I mean, yeah.
The one thing, Lei, that I will disagree with you on is that, so if you watch the video again, when he tried to do, hey, Rivian, it didn't respond the first time. And so he had to say it again. The very first time they interacted, they moved to the guy in the car. So I think that's why he's pressing the button, because he wants to make sure that it doesn't stutter. It doesn't not acknowledge him. I actually think that's why. Now, the continuous, that's something different. But the button thing, I think it was because there was a bug that didn't hear him the first time. And I think that's why.
Yeah, so
but also
it's still early. And LiDAR, I think what they announced was it won't go on until later, 2026. So
right.
We're still a year out.
While, to your point, 25% of all cars being shipped out in China have LiDAR. And this crosses the ICE EV boundary too, because there's LiDAR on ICE vehicles in China as well. And so I look at the demo that they gave as logical steps into the seamless user experience. Okay. I don't look at it like, wow, Rivian was really novel and innovative with this approach to how I would love to be able to say, hey, car, conserve as much energy as you can while I'm going down to Detroit. Order me a Starbucks on the one on 12 miles so that I can and then use my level 3 to take me to Starbucks, go through the drive-thru, pick that coffee up. To me, that's all logical. So it's like, and I'll be frank, Lei, the ooze came from the KOLs because they want to keep on getting invited to those events. And the employees. That's where the ooze came from. Because if you've been to China, you're not oohing.
Well, that's where the other part of deja vu is that even the Chinese launch events, you have a group of people oohing while they're probably not the KOLs, they're probably the fans or their owners or users. Yeah,
same.
Do that.
All right, 差不多. But honestly, this is the whole thing. If you're media and you're oohing, then that means that you need to get out from under the rock and start listening to us on China EVs and More.
Yeah.
Every week, because you'll be educated on what's going on in China, minute by minute. For instance, Bronco hybrid rolling off the line December 31st, right? So, and we can talk about it later, but I was on a panel discussion in Detroit, and I talked about all these things that most people don't know.
We always look at things with the lens of China, the back of our mind. Because we've seen those, we've experienced those. So we may be hard or critical, let's say on Rivian, for example, because we compare against Tesla actually is still the benchmark. Because He Xiaopeng, he sent out a message, Moments, saying he's currently in Silicon Valley, I think, touring. And he made a bet that by end of August next year, they want to achieve the same capability as Tesla FSD V14.2 in Silicon Valley with their VLA 2.0. If they achieve that, he's going to open up a canteen or a cafeteria at their Silicon Valley office. If not, one of his lieutenants in charge of autonomous driving is going to have to run naked at the Golden Gate Bridge. He posted this. It was funny. So that to me is saying, wow, I mean, he's impressed about FSD because they're probably still not there yet. They want to be there. They want to be the China's FSD, but Rivian is somewhere behind still, but they obviously showed the potential and their goals with the Autonomy AI Day. And
but
really,
here's what's important, Lei. I want to be clear. I'm not poo-pooing FSD. What I'm upset about is that it's so ubiquitous that it creates risk for people on the road. And there are people that aren't very diligent about keeping an eye on what's going on the roads. It is an amazing, amazing, amazing accomplishment for them to be able to do it without LiDAR. Philosophically, we'll figure out in the next 3, 5, 7 years whether that was the right move or not. Long term, probably it is. But the Rivian woman said that LiDAR is now hundreds of dollars. So
compared
if
to
it's
tens of thousands of dollars 10 years ago.
in 2016, I think she said, or she showed the two pictures side by side, 2025 versus 2016. And so those innovations are coming from the RoboSenses, from the Hesais, from the InnoVisions, while they're still driving down cost. And I don't believe that those three will go out of business. Some of the weak LiDAR players will go out of business because of them. Luminar are struggling because they wanted to be the premium end of the LiDAR. Now, Innoviz, our friend from Innoviz, he seems to still be doing okay with the Germans.
Yeah, well, I don't know. BMW and Volkswagen, they're working on that Mobileye robotaxi, which is coming to the US, I think. On that part of it. Yeah.
Well, Mobileye is probably the weakest partner in that partnership.
But again, the thing is, XPeng, they went through this putting LiDAR on first among anyone. And then they
with the P5, with the
P5, which is it's weird because the P5 is already it's gone from our vocabulary of China and EV stuff because it's so far out. And then when they went as fast as ditching LiDAR, remember we talked about this, going to a vision approach.
Baidu too.
Yeah, some other ones are not there yet, but that's where the evolution. We're going to different paths, right? The LiDAR is going onto vehicles, but XPeng, Tesla are the vision AI kind of the proponent.
One thing that I think is important, and I tweeted about this, Lei, is Volkswagen is partners with Rivian and XPeng. It's kind of coincidental.
Which is the other thing that's interesting because after watching yesterday, you kind of understand. I think Rivian is more like the XPeng of America. And it so happens that Volkswagen invested in both of these companies. One for the East, one for the West.
What I tweeted about was now Volkswagen's going to use Rivian silicon in the US. They're going to use XPeng, the Volkswagen brand, at least.
Yeah.
It's going to use XPeng silicon in China. What does this be going to be used in the EU? Who are they going to source from in the EU? So it doesn't make sense for them to use NVIDIA because they'll have already qualified silicon from Rivian. And that's my thought. They did not say that they were going to sell their silicon, but here's the thing. The amount of investment that Rivian has to be making on the silicon design team, with volumes that they have, they'd be upside down forever. In order to get a return on that investment in silicon design, they would have to sell tens of thousands of them.
Yeah.
And that only happens with, even if they sell the R2 and it's a smash hit.
Yeah, but as a consumer, I'm in love with R2, especially how the LiDAR is integrated, how the vehicle size is, how the design is. I'm going to be a little bit torn because, like I say, I'm ready to switch. I also do want to experience FSD, and I'm sure Tesla, they're offering 0% APR on the standard. Why? And I'm really close to pulling the trigger if they do that on the premiums, because I don't like the standard. And if I get a Tesla, I definitely get FSD. I think for a kind of we talking about this, I think owe it to myself, maybe you as well, to really actually own one and experience and talk about it.
Oh, I plan to. Not necessarily FSD, but either GM, Tesla, or Ford.
Sure. But R2 is really, I think it should sell well, but I think it's a bet. So there's a lot of questions raised. Again, the volume for the wrap, one.
I'm not concerned about Rivian's design. I'm not concerned about their innovation, technology, software side, and UX design. I don't know if they know how to build cars. They obviously don't know how to sell them. And so that's the challenge. The cars are too heavy because the ranges are too small. And then if you get the high-end versions with the dual motors and the larger batteries, we're getting into $100,000 vehicle. So
Ugh.
they want to be the Patagonia, but Patagonia, they have a lot of variety of, and so I'm sure they'll get themselves out of this, but I don't know. Does that window close for them? Because you saw Jeep with the Recon. Now it's got 200 miles of range, which is terrible. 250 miles are terrible. But the low end R1s, they also have less than 300 miles range. So the legacy OEMs in North America need to offer affordable cars with 300 miles of range. They need to, and whether they use LMR, whether they use LFP, whether they use Chinese cells, that's what needs to happen in 2026. If it doesn't happen by middle of 27, they're going to be taken out of the market because the Chinese will be here probably in some way. And I think and the legacy automakers will figure out a way to make an affordable EV with over 300 miles of range. So,
Yeah. Well, affordability is the key, I think, word for, we can talk about Ford and Renault, because Ford did have that Volkswagen. Now they're going to have the what? Ford now or Renault. And the key to that is affordability in the small EV segment. And that's where Renault is good at. And hence Ford is teaming up. Yeah, I got one in my box. I got to put a little shelf here. But
yeah, you have an excuse. I'm going to build a shelf right here too with all my.
And speaking of Renault, they just launched the Twingo, right? Kind of the 20,000 euro vehicle. And guess what? Close to 50% of the procurement comes out of China for that vehicle. That's the cost. That's the affordability. And at the same time, we heard about, what was the organization in the US that, I think there was a Reuters articles about not allowing the sales or manufacturers, Chinese automakers, to set up manufacturing in the US, right? So these are all intertwined when it comes to affordability and why Ford is working with Renault. And also Ford, I mean, Jim Farley he's smart, right? He's, live asset, whatever. I think these are two companies are both, they're not actively building in, if at all, in China, but they're utilizing the localization capabilities of China to their benefit.
So I bookmarked an article in the New York Times about Doug Field, Ford doing what they're doing in LA. Have not read it yet. I've had about 15 people send it to me.
Yeah. The Skunk Works. He will be at CES. I think he's doing a talk, so it'll be interesting to.
Yeah, it is. Wow, what an interesting time, and let's talk about the AV stuff. You said a big important week in AV.
Well, Rivian
you
was
talked to
the major one. We talked about Rivian, and then Mercedes and Momenta, right? I mean, that was kind of, Mercedes is an investor in Momenta. Mercedes using Momenta in China for the L2++. So I guess it's only natural that they're now using Momenta in let's say, a geopolitical immune environment, which is the Middle East. They don't have to think about what's happening in Europe, not in the US. They're doing something else in the US. And Mercedes, I think, is the one of maybe not the only, but few that are betting on the L2++. They're betting on L3. They're betting on L4 with multiple partners. Momenta being a key one. And the other part about Momenta next year is also they're running the Uber robotaxi in Munich. That was announced Munich Auto Show, right? Yeah.
Momenta is going to be IPOing in 2026.
IPOing,
too,
yep. Yeah, I heard about that even earlier this year. They're trying to prepare. probably one of the bigger IPOs in the EV/AV space in 2026.
Coming at a particularly interesting year as Waymo moves aggressively in the
Waymo.
United States.
Yeah.
Because they're probably going to be IPOing very soon as well.
Waymo is announced a full year 14 million rides, and then they're now fully autonomous in 10 cities, and they'll be in 20 cities, including Tokyo and London, next year. I think just within the last few months and weeks, right, we saw that kind of scaling go up like rather. And I did 9 rides all in Phoenix when we had the volleyball tournament in June.
While there was that accident in China with the Baidu robotaxi.
Yeah.
Did you read anything else about what was going on, or I just saw a couple of posts, but I didn't dig into it. It had run someone over or something. I need to find out more.
I saw that. I haven't seen that much being reported, but I think there's bystander had to lift the vehicle up to have the person dragged out or something. But I think these episodes are probably gonna remain part of the,
sure,
here and there. And that's why, right, Elon Musk, he's like, that's why we want to be, what's the word he used? Paranoia, right? We want to have that paranoia of taking all these safety drivers, for whatever, if we take his word.
I don't know. He says all these things and quotes all these numbers and volumes, and they just don't happen the way.
Tweet that reply to the tweet, he said Waymo has no chance against Tesla, right? It'll become evident in hindsight.
Fair enough, whatever. The one thing about Waymo setting the pace, not only from a launching in multiple cities with 4 seasons, but also they are virtually the only company that's publishing their data about accidents.
Safety.
So that is going to really become an important difference between Waymo and everyone else. The Chinese generally aren't going to be doing that either. They're going to be on the same side as Tesla. We want to keep it a secret. We don't want to give you any details. Now, you and I living in China for so long, the number of deaths on Chinese roads, especially in early days, is enormous. It's a big number. I don't know what it exactly is because I don't even know if they report it, and it's probably not accurate when they do, because up until 7-8 years ago, there were still people riding bicycles on major highways, right?
They still are.
So yeah, and tier 2, tier 3 cities.
Yeah.
So and then in the 2010s, I remember going off an exit ramp and seeing someone drive in reverse because they took the wrong exit. Like, I'm passing them by on an exit because they're going reverse the wrong way.
Yeah.
To try to get back on the highway. And I'm like, what? This person has a death wish. So,
well, then again, safety is all these Chinese automakers talk about these days at launch events. Geely just announced their global safety center today. But, yeah.
China social is so unforgiving. Whether that's real, whether that's paid water armies, we don't know. And don't get me wrong, the resilience of Xiaomi is very, very impressive because of that tragedy. Then because the Mega has really gotten a lot of bad press.
Yeah.
Still no answers for that. No data, no updates on what really happened. And the challenge for the Chinese is, as Pony launches in Europe, as Pony and WeRide launch in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Singapore, they're not going to be able to manipulate things the way they want to.
How transparency plays a role. How transparent can they be? I think something to watch.
Yeah. And so, especially, unfortunately, I have to say this, especially when and if, probably when, there's going to be a fatality involved with one of these companies. I think you and I both agree that there's probably a certain inevitability to it. The chances are very, very high.
Yeah.
Because when you look at Singapore, there's still bikes in parts of the road. Now, Singapore is much more mature. Hong Kong also, not many bikes on many roads unless you're in the city, which bodes well for the autonomous vehicles because you're not going very fast. And so I would think that fatalities would happen more so on highways and freeways than they would in the cities. That's all I had, man. I think we should save it for our blockbuster year in review.
Yeah, I mean we can do that next week, I think, and then the following week is the Christmas, and then it's 2026 already. I can't believe
and then
it.
Before you and I head to Las Vegas, we can do a predictions 2026 episode because you and I will be in Vegas on the 3rd, right?
Yep.
So maybe we try to do something on the 2nd. Maybe we record it in Vegas.
Definitely try the Zoox, because Zoox is available, and we have to add it to the bucket list, right? We've done, virtually almost every. Tensor is going to be in Vegas. I think you can sign up to get a ride.
That thing is enormous. It's like the size of a Mega. It's that big. It's 18 feet long.
It's bigger than Waymo iPaces. Is that correct?
Yeah. Okay. It's huge. Right. It is huge.
Well, then we have the Zeekr RT, which is even bigger, but that's a robo van, not a taxi, sort of.
So this week for me, I just did a panel discussion. Mich Auto is a advocacy group for the automotive space in Michigan, and I'm good friends with the person that runs Mich Auto, so he invited me to be on a panel discussion. Frank panel discussion. He loves that I don't sugarcoat things, and he appreciates it. And so, we still need to educate Lei because there's someone on the panel who I don't know where half of the data that they were referring to came from. Googled some of it after the panel discussion that evening, and it was not accurate. So there are still narratives being pushed by probably the people that you and I know that have not been to China recently and are fishing for clicks, fishing for projects, fishing for consulting. So it's important what we do, Lei. So let's continue to do that, and let's get to questions, comments. Okay, SPX MoMA first. SPS Nomad. Thanks for joining again. Good morning, guys. With L4 and AI coming, would it make sense for Rivian to enter the China market? No, not at this time.
Well, they got to get their act. Well, you talked about manufacturing. They got to get manufacturing right here in the U.S. because they're going to have another plan, right? So once they get that through, then I forget about China for now. You can't, too much on the plate.
Yeah, I agree. Let me see here. So this is referring to a question I just posted. And I'll ask you first, Lei, and I'll read the comment next. Is Rivian able to stay independent, or does a legacy end up swallowing them up, or someone end up swallowing them up? What do you think?
Well, Volkswagen invested $5 billion?
Yep.
It's part of the answer. I don't think they can be independent. Meaning, even Volkswagen for XPeng, right? Is XPeng independent? We can debate. So it's murky. I think it's never an absolute answer that they're independent. But at this point, it's harder to remain independent. Maybe that's the kind of answer.
What I'm curious to see, because the ID Unix, which is going to be built using a lot of XPeng IP,
it's coming.
That's going to start production in January.
At the end of this month, yeah.
So once Volkswagen uses Rivian IP, I'm wondering how the user experience is for a Volkswagen in China versus a Volkswagen in the United States is going to be. Because inevitably it will be. And what Rivian probably needs to figure out is that latency issue that you talked about.
Yeah, it'll
Because
definitely
that
be
would,
different. I think what the customers are used to here versus China and demanding the kind of, whether it's speed, whether functionality, is still just step totally different. Age of people using these products is different. The ecosystem that they're used to buying on Meituan, DD, all this
Xiaomi.
stuff are different, right? Yeah.
The one thing that you and I can confidently say is that Chinese consumers would not accept that level of latency that we
It
saw
will not
yesterday.
sell in China based on what they showed. No, because other people are offering better experiences.
What if Rivian and Lucid? I think that would be the worst idea. Not a good idea. They both need help, financial help, number one. They both aren't able to sell, and they both don't know how to manufacture or mass produce things. So now I've actually been told by a few people now that I was considering an R1 because they have some incentives, but it's still too expensive. And I'd spoken to a couple of Rivian owners, and it's weird. A few of them told me that they have a ton of quality issues, but a couple of them told me that they haven't had any issues. I haven't heard that
Yes.
much quality problems with Lucids, but Rivians, I have heard people complain.
Yeah, I was talking with one of our other fans offline about picking between a Y and a R2. The difference being, I think the Y is established, mature product that are built in 3 locations in the world, whereas R2 is a new product with new architecture, new hardware. So you have to weigh out, the maturity versus that newish aspect, which could be a kind of a question mark for quality. So that's something that I, as a consumer, will have to weigh.
You don't necessarily always want to be first in line to buy a brand new product from anybody, even if they have well-known reputation for high quality. Even a Toyota.
Yeah.
Maybe it's better to be the second mover as opposed to the first.
Yeah.
And I also think it's important to note that the R2 still has an instrument panel, digital cluster, where the Model Y is basically a center stack. Okay, so manufacturing, the simplicity of manufacturing a Model Y versus an R2 is going to be a lot. And rule of thumb, general rule of thumb, the more times it's touched, the more people that touch it, the more pieces that it has, it increases the chance and risk of quality issues. Full stop.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyways, everyone, we will be early with our announcement on the year in review episode so that you don't miss out. Next week is the last full week of December for most people before Christmas. So
I think next week is the best time to do it because then it'll be CS and then, we go into January.
And also a plug for the other platform. On Tuesday, I'm going to be hosting with Joe a year in review, more focused on North America, Europe a little bit.
I'll send you some photos. I was looking for some photos when BYD attended Detroit Auto Show for the first time in 2008. And that photo
I'd love to see it.
Familiar faces in it. You'll recognize them.
Okay.
It's a bunch of people standing behind the F6DM. One very well-known reporter that we have mentioned on the show. Standing.
Right on. Okay.
Yeah. I sent it to him.
So
I look so young.
Everyone, have a terrific weekend. It's get that office set up.
It's better than last week, and I'm sure next week will be better than this week. So bear with me.
Everyone, thanks again for joining us. Have a good weekend. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from. We'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.